We're talking today with Dr. Barry McAlpine of Holland, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Barry, can you start us off with some background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in 1945 in Cass City, Michigan, in the Thumb area of Michigan.
Okay. Did you grow up there?
I grew up in the Thumb. I grew up on a small farm, oldest of 6 children.
All right. And did you finish high school?
Oh, yeah, graduated from high school in 1963.
Okay. And then what did you do after you got out?
I went to, I worked for General Motors for a few months. I went to Michigan State University. Actually played a little baseball at Michigan State, and that didn't work out very well. So in I think 1965, I was drafted by my friends and neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
They sent a little notice to me.
Now, were you not a full-time student at that point, or had your grades gotten too low, or?
I was a full-time student, but they sent draft notifications to everybody, whether you were a student or not, and then you could use a student deferment
Right.
if you wanted to, or if you're married, you could use a married deferment.
Okay.
Well, I chose not to use my student deferment. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, etc. So I thought that was my chance to get into a war. A new war was starting, and you only get your chance once in your lifetime. And I sat around the kitchen table talking to Uncle Joe and Grandpa and about their experiences in World War II, etc. And I always wondered if that would ever come my way. And Vietnam was just starting to cook a little bit, and I thought this would be a good time for me to enter, I guess, my war.
Right.
And so I didn't want to miss it.
Okay.
The fact is, I got married before I went, so I could have used that too. I could have had a student deferment or a marriage deferment. But
Right. But you were sort of at a point in your life where you were kind of sorting things out anyway, and
yeah, and I thought that was important. That's an important time of someone's life. I mean, you can go through your whole life, and there are certain years or moments in history that, and of course, you don't know it at the time, but when you look back and start connecting the dots, and I'm glad that I did choose that route. It was very interesting.
all right.
Very fun.
Now, so okay, now take us through the process. You've gotten the draft notice. You say, okay, yeah, I'm not going to try for the deferment. Now you go to an induction center from there, or what happens?
Yeah, I think I went to an induction center down in Detroit. I think I went by bus, and I can't recall all the little details about that, but
Do they have a physical there?
I probably had a physical there. I can't recall. And I don't know where I ended up that night. I think I might have ended up at, I know I did my basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay. Now, did you go straight down to Fort Knox from the induction center, or did you go home for a while first?
No, we left. I was
Okay.
drafted and took a bus to Detroit, and as far as I can remember, I went right to Fort Knox, Kentucky.
All right. What kind of reception did you get at Fort Knox?
I don't remember. This is back in '65, and I was certainly it was a different world than I was used to, coming off a farm in the Thumb of Michigan. But I do remember a couple things about that time, and I was a pretty independent kid, and I didn't understand the orders given by someone else coming on and yelling and woofing and trying to get me to a square pole to fit in a round hole, and I had some difficult times with my, I guess you call them drill instructors, and they had to break me down a little bit, and it took them a while, but it broke me down, and then they could make me into a better person.
Right.
Thanks for that.
So what did they do to people? How do they persuade you that it would be a good idea to do it their way?
Well, for instance, they knew all the tricks, and I remember I remember I hadn't been in an environment where you could hear back from a microphone. So in other words, it wasn't my barracks one night, and the sergeant come over the loudspeaker and said something, and I just said something silly back to him, and I think he heard my voice and remembered my voice and identified me by my voice, and I could hear him running up the steps. He couldn't wait to get his hands on me, and he put a bucket over my head, and he beat the hell out of that bucket, and it didn't leave a mark on me, but it sure made a lot of noise in my head, and that got my attention. And I think from that day on, I had a little more respect, and for my superiors, I guess, in military terminology.
All right. Now, what did your training actually consist of? What were you doing during the day?
Well, I started out as, just learning the Army ways. I guess we were marching, and we did a lot of map reading, and we did target practice and cleaning our weapons, and just learning the military values and military terminology and proper radio procedures. Boy, I haven't thought about that in a long time. So we were busy from probably 6 in the morning till 8 at night, 9 at night. I can't remember. I know I was tired when I was done at the day.
And then what kind of physical training did you get?
Well, we had a lot of running and calisthenics, and I can't remember all the stuff we did, but it was mostly running and calisthenics.
Now, were you in pretty good shape at that point?
I was in pretty good shape when I went in.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of built my strength and stamina. I was certainly a country boy was in better shape than our city cousins, right. And I was more fortunate. I had been shooting guns since I was 11 years old, and I felt really good at that. And because I played baseball, why I could throw a hand grenade better than anybody, and I could shoot better than anybody, and I played in a band in high school. I could march better than anybody, and it was one of those things that everything they were doing, it fell right in for me.
Right. And how long did the boot camp last? Was it in 8 weeks or longer than that?
I think it must have been 8 weeks. I think 8-week period of time.
Now, at the beginning of that, do you remember, did they have you take a bunch of tests or things like that to figure out what your MOS was going to be?
Yeah, they did. And I forget what it was. They had I guess they had your IQ up there for whatever that was worth. And I remember that. So my MOS was military intelligence. And so then they sent me to regular infantry training.
Okay. And where did you go for that?
Stayed right at Fort Knox.
Okay, they did infantry training there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. That was a big place for it. I know they did armored cavalry training at Fort Knox.
Well, I was armored. I was in an armored division when they sent me to Germany. So, and we had armored personnel carriers,
right.
but my MOS was infantry.
Was still infantry, yeah. But they have armored infantry, and they could train with those units and that equipment. Okay.
And with my MOS being infantry, and then as a scout, that was part of this new wave, I guess, of military intelligence, working with scouts. I don't know if it is today or not, but that's how it went.
Okay. Now, the AIT part, what did they actually do with you there?
God, I can't remember that much either, but I know it was more map reading, and remember this is back in '65, so they really didn't have the big advancements that I'm sure they did in '69 and '70 and '71. We were still working off the old premise of Korean War, I think.
Right.
I mean, we still had old C rations and the old fatigues and stuff like that. So I think the curriculum was pretty old-fashioned.
Well, a lot of it would have been actually probably geared toward war in Europe, with the Soviets.
Well, for sure.
That kind of thing. Now, what kind of rifles were you training with?
Oh,
you have M14s still?
We had M14s. Yeah, I forgot. They were big, heavy pieces of equipment. I didn't see an M16 until I got in Vietnam.
All right. Now, was this another 8-week course as far as you can recall? Or?
Yeah, I think it was an 8-week course, and then I got a chance to go home, and I spent, I think, a month with my new wife, and then I was shipped off to Germany.
All right. Was that a surprise to get orders for Germany, or?
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't even thinking about it. I mean, I didn't care where I went, but I went to Germany, and that was one of the craziest things I ever had happen to me. I remember going on a bus to New York, and we left the harbor of New York. I remember seeing the Statue of Liberty on this boat, and I remember on this huge troop carrier they gave us chili for dinner, and in about 2 hours everybody was seasick.
Mm-hmm.
And there was chili about ankle deep running through that troop transport, and for 12 days it was the smelliest troop carrying ship in the world, I'm sure of it. And it was in November, and the gales of November were raising heck with the Atlantic Ocean. And wow, I remember one time I stuck my head out and the waves were higher than the smokestack on this boat, and it was a terrible experience. I got off that boat in Bremerhaven, Germany, and I kissed the ground, and I told myself, if I'm ever going home, I'm going to fly home, or else I'm going to desert this army, because I'm not getting back on a boat. That's not going to happen to me.
Then once you got to Germany, what did they do with you?
I was assigned to a unit on the border of Czechoslovakia, and I was a young E1 or E2.
Probably E2 at that point.
The basic lower guy there, and I was sent to some I forget the terminology, but it was some place for troops stay.
Mm-hmm.
His name, Fort something or other.
Right.
I think this was Schweinfurt,
Mm-hmm.
and we played. And so when they found out I played baseball at Michigan State, I was recruited to play on the baseball team.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that being said, I didn't have to stand any formations in the morning or at noon or at night, and the first sergeant didn't like that at all, of course. And boy, I remember he couldn't wait till my baseball season ended. So, in the meantime, I went out for the boxing team, and that was interesting too. And I was the only white guy that went out for the boxing team. And then one night after boxing practice, I was surrounded by black guys. And they want to teach me a lesson that I was not supposed to be in their gym. And they did. They taught me a lesson. I ended up in a infirmary, I guess you call it,
Mm-hmm.
and I spent a night there. I couldn't hardly move my arms for a couple days. That's where I learned how to do the one-armed push-ups. And so, needless to say, I couldn't even try out for the boxing team after that. The baseball season had ended, and the first sergeant was laying for me, of course, and in the meantime, I had put in requests to go to Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and I had been turned down. It takes 30 or 60 days to go through the paperwork. It was turned down 30 or 60, and I requested it again. It was turned down again by the colonel. And finally, at the end of this, because the colonel wanted me to stay on the baseball team,
Mm-hmm.
so at the end of the baseball season, the first sergeant came into my room, and it was the first time I was under his umbrella. And he went over to my bunk and inspected it, and he dropped a quarter on it, and if that quarter didn't bounce in the air, he would tear up your bunk. And so he tore up my bunk and my footlocker, and he looked at me funny, and I looked at him funny, and the first sergeant went over and shut the door, and he locked it. Here I am in this room where the first sergeant was looking at me kind of funny, and I knew we were going to have some excitement now. So he walked over to me, and I popped him, and so I knocked him down, and we went right on it for several minutes, and that wasn't a pretty sight there after a while. But nevertheless, I remember some sergeants came in and they broke the door down and separated us. And my request, I think it was called a 1049 form, came through, and so then my request was honored, and I was sent to Vietnam.
All right. Now, do you remember what unit you were with in Germany?
I do not. I had a square patch with blue and white lines in the patch, and it was armor.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I was supposed to be with an armored personnel carrier,
Okay.
APC, whatever
Yeah.
they called it.
Let's see, we're probably armored infantry with
Yeah.
first armored or whatever else is over there.
And we go out in the Black Forest and do these little war games or something, but I never could go because I was playing baseball.
All right. So when then did you leave Germany?
Man, I don't know. I don't know. It'd probably be, well, let's see. So I probably left Germany in the summer of
66 now?
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking probably maybe in the fall, probably September, October, something like that.
Okay.
So, I can't remember.
Did you at least get to fly home?
Yeah, I got to fly home, man. I wasn't going home if I wasn't going to fly. I'm telling you right now.
All right. And then did you get a little bit of time off at home before you had to go on to Vietnam?
I had a month. I had a
Okay.
month at home, and then I flew to Oakland, California, and spent a few days in Oakland.
Now, did you stay in the depot, or could you go out at all, or?
No, I couldn't go out.
Right.
I was on a short list
Mhm.
to go someplace. And
Yeah.
I remember flying in these military air transports, and they were cargo planes. It wasn't very comfortable.
Yeah.
And we'd fly into, I remember landing in Hawaii and fueled up.
Mm-hmm.
I think we landed in Guam. A couple islands hopped through
Yeah.
there, and then into Vietnam.
And do you remember where you landed in Vietnam?
I think Saigon.
Okay, because there's, the airport proper was Tan Son Nhut, and there were two big bases where you could land. It was Long Binh and Bien Hoa. And the main processing depot was at Bien Hoa. But do you remember if you landed at one place and they busted you someplace else before you went out, or just kind of fuzzy?
Don't remember a thing about it.
All right. So when was it that you actually got to Vietnam?
Oh, I don't know when I got to Vietnam. October or November.
Okay, so the fall of
It was in the fall.
66 anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember your first impression of Vietnam when you got there?
Well, I remember my first flight into An Khê, which was the home of the Cav, the 1st Cav Division was in An Khê, and I remember landing at the airfield in a Caribou aircraft, and the plane didn't. It came down real hard. I mean, we were at a high altitude, and all of a sudden, they didn't want to take on mortars, which was new terms for me, and so we came down really fast, boom, and they landed and didn't shut the motors off, and we were told to jump out of the aircraft, so we jump out the back door, and they hustle us off the airstrip, and that's all I remember. But that was a real fast descent. That's all I remember.
So that was kind of your welcome to Vietnam.
Yeah, and then I had to wait somewhere for orders, so they sent me to the 1st of the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
And well, before that, we had to stand in this one area, and they wanted to know who was married. And if you were married, you were supposed to take a step forward. Well, I'm thinking if you're married, they're going to send you to someplace that's pretty safe, and so I didn't want to go in the safe spot. So I said I didn't say I was married. So then they said, okay, you married guys, you go here, and you other guys, you go here. And so I went there, and I went to the 1st of the 9th. First I was in a cab outfit right there, but went to the 1st of the 9th, which was the most ambitious of all the units, and they had a record of starting like almost all the fights for the 1st Cavalry Division, and we have more than 50% of the kills, and it was an extremely active outfit.
Now, did that have sort of a high proportion of helicopters, gunships, and that kind of thing? I mean, was it parts of it kind of really a helicopter unit as opposed to just a ground unit?
Yeah, that's what we were. We were 4 troops. There was Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta.
Mm-hmm.
A, B, and C troops were helicopter borne. I think we had 25 or 26 helicopters. We maybe had a total group of us, which included pilots and mechanics and cooks and supply people. We probably had 90 personnel. Of the 90 personnel, 30 were maybe ground scouts, and maybe we had 10 or 15 aero scouts, meaning little scout helicopters, and plus we had gunships. We might have had 6 or 8 gunships, which included the pilot and co-pilot and 2-door gunners. And then we had, yeah, those are the 2. We had the reds were the gunships, the whites were the ground, the aero recon, and the blues were the ground recon. I was a blue.
Right. But it's a very different kind of composition from what you'd been in, say, if you were in, 7th Cavalry or something like that, where you would have had ground companies with, in principle, 100 and some men in them, although not usually, but that's where they would do most of their fighting on the ground. But the helicopters just moved them around for the most part. But here, they're really integrated into your unit. I mean, you still get to go on the ground, but a lot of the other men are in helicopters.
In the air flying. The total concept was they would send the blues in. First, the scout team would go out, and if they would find, hopefully they'd take an enemy shot, or they'd stir the enemy up so they would at least make a scene or get some fire going, or they'd see if there was smoke coming out of the jungle at night, or if they saw a wire along a trail, or if they saw a weapon someplace. And then the next day they'd write that all down, and then the next day or two they'd put my squad in, or 2 squads, or 3 squads, and then we would jump in there and we would find out what the hell's going on. And so we would start the fight. Right. And that was a fun way to, I mean, we get up in the morning, and I'm telling you, we knew we were going to make some air assaults that day. In fact, I think the most we ever did was 11 air assaults in one day.
All right. Let's sort of start here sort of at the beginning of your time there, sort of very end of 67. Now, do you get kind of thrown into the standard type of mission right away, or is there any effort to kind of orient you at all or explain to you what it is that you're going to be doing?
No, there was absolutely no orientation. Okay. And actually this was like in the fall of 66.
66, right, yes.
There was absolutely no orientation. I remember getting to my outfit, and they had the tents about as big as this room, and the veterans had their own tent, bunks lined up. They were never there because they're always out in the field. And I remember my first night, I was laying in my bunk, and I felt there's something on my chest. And I get up, and I go turn on a light, and nothing was around. I turn the light out and get back to bed pretty soon. And so I decided I'm going to hold on to this wire, and when I feel something on my chest, I'm going to turn the light on and not get out of bed. And I did that, and there was a rat right on my chest, and he looked me in the eye, and then he took off running. Of course, I'd never seen nothing like that before. And so I jumped up and took a gun, and I started shooting it down. That didn't go over very well with everybody in the compound because I was inside the wire shooting, but that was my first night with the 1st of the 9th.
All right. Now, how quickly after that do you start going out in the field?
I think I was there a couple days. I mean, I had to meet the supply sergeants, and they given me my weapons and my ammunition, and I had assigned for a few things. And we had been in we were always in firefights. There was always a need for more men with the blues, and so I'm sure with maybe a day or two, I was taken by aircraft out to a landing zone and introduced to my sergeant in E6. His name was Sergeant Swanson from Upper Peninsula. And I forget his first name. I think it was Bob Swanson. And myself and a young black kid out of Chicago named Bobby Peck were sent out that same day, and Swanson was low on men. He had just had some wounded, or maybe KIAs a day or two before, so we were assigned to the first squad of B Troop, 1st Squadron, 9th Cavalry.
Okay. Now, when you were issued your weapon and so forth at the base camp, was that an M16 now that you got?
That was an M16 that was later replaced by a CAR-15.
Okay.
And
A little bit lighter weapon.
a shorter,
Yeah.
lighter, jammed just as frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't any better. I liked it because we were so mobile and doing a lot of air assaults that the smaller the weapon, the better. And of course, in our environment, we were in elephant grass and jungle, and a long rifle just was not the best thing to have.
Yep.
Although we could have it, we had our choice. We could have our choice. We want to carry a shotgun. We want to carry a BAR. If we wanted to carry,
Would anybody actually take a BAR?
no,
I wouldn't think that was a real likely one either.
no, not with our group.
Yeah.
No one ever had that. But we could take a grenade launcher.
Mhm.
But it was usually up to the squad leader to tell the youngsters what weapon we all should be carrying.
Okay. Now you joined him out at an LZ. At this point, I mean, does the sergeant or anybody take a moment to kind of explain to you, here's how it works, or just do this, or just follow me, or what do they tell you?
I can't remember what the heck they told us, but it was a hell of an experience, and I think we just kind of hung close to the guys that had been there for a while, the veterans, and I was kind of an outdoorsman, kind of a kid anyway, and this kind of cowboy Indian thing fit for me, and so it wasn't a big deal. I kind of had a natural born instinct for this kind of stuff. I do remember the squad leaders telling me, Mac, he called me Mac, he was grooming me to be the point man, and so he wanted me to walk right with him for a while. He talked to me for a few days, and then he would put me on the flank and out there, and then I'd walk with a point man right behind the point man for a week or two, that kind of stuff.
Right. So he was kind of working you in and giving you some chance to learn what the heck was going on before at least throwing you out on point.
Oh yeah. Well, you can't put anybody out on point. No, somebody's got some skills, got to be on point. I mean, I don't mind walking in an ambush, but if I'm going to go in an ambush, I'm going to take myself in an ambush. I don't want some incapable clown put me in an ambush.
Right. Okay. Now, how long was it before you encountered any enemy?
Every day.
Okay.
I mean, every day. That was our job. We were to start a fight. So every day, we'd have a meeting at first light. In fact, before first light. Later on, I would meet before first light. But let's go back to when I just got there.
Yeah.
And the staff sergeant or my squad leader would have his meeting with the S3. I think S3 is intelligence, or S2 is intelligence. I can't.
S2 is intelligence.
S2.
And S3 maybe operations or whatever.
S2 supply, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I forgot what those, the brass anyway. But S2 is intelligence, and so the S2 people would come down and they'd have a meeting with the staff sergeants and the pilots, and they'd cook up a plan what we're going to do from first light, and then maybe at 10, in the morning, and maybe something in the afternoon, and at 2 or 3 o'clock, we'd have these certain things we were going to do. Now, of course, that all changed. Within an hour, everything went to hell anyway, but at least you had a plan. I guess the book said you have to have a plan, so we'd try to have a plan.
Okay. So they're meeting with the sergeant. So basically, do the scouts operate in squads? So the actual leaders in the field are going to be on comms rather than having a lieutenant with you or something like that?
Well, the Blues were a platoon. So we did have a platoon leader who was a captain slot, but we never had a captain in the slot. We always had a lieutenant.
Okay.
The captains, they never lived long. I mean, you didn't get to be a captain if you were in a Blues. But then it broke down into 4 squads.
Right.
And the squads were never full. we might have had 6 guys, 7 guys per squad. I think we're supposed to have 8 or 9, but we could never get a full squad. We never had enough men.
Right.
But, you know, we did what we could,
Mm-hmm.
and it was okay.
Right.
We made do.
I mean, do you remember your first time out in the field, or did they all run together?
I don't remember my first time out. That was a blur. I don't know if I ever could have remembered my first time out. It was probably just a normal thing, but I do remember, I think maybe my first month, some funny things happening. But
Okay. Can you recall some of those here?
well, with the Blues, I remember we were stationed out by Pleiku in down by the rubber plantations, and I remember they had this pet monkey before I got there, and I forget the monkey's name, but that monkey was always tied up inside. The Blues had a big tent, and in those days, I don't know what the hell was they thinking, but there was no clearing zone around the tent. We were right in the middle of a jungle, and the jungle came right up to the tent. And I instinctively could tell this is not a good spot, because we can get in big trouble here every night. And nevertheless, we'd come back after dark.
But you were inside a perimeter of some sort, though.
There was a very light one strip of barbed wire through there. It wasn't very secure. And because I wanted to move around a lot. So, remember one night we came back, and the monkey would always jump on us when we would come in the tent. He couldn't wait for us to come home, just to terrorize us. Well, one night we came home, and the monkey was hung. He had hung himself. He got tangled up on a timber above there, and anyway, the monkey was hanging there, and he was dead. You know, little things like that you never forget. And Bob Hope, I remember Bob Hope coming for the Christmas tour in Pleiku, and we didn't know that that's what we were supposed to be doing, so they sent us out on this big perimeter, and we had to go up and down. I didn't know what the heck we were doing there, but in fact it was Bob Hope, and we were the first ring of defense way out. And then if something happened back in, well, that was somebody else's worry, but we were supposed to be the first line of defense and intercept anything going on. But, you know, little things like that, I do remember.
Now, was the terrain you were operating in largely jungle at this point?
Yeah, it was jungle, thick jungle. And I you know, so it was a fall time of year, so, you know, it wasn't winter time yet. The jungle was real thick, and it never got thin, by the way, but it would get thicker.
And was it dry season when you got there, or did the monsoon come in, or?
I can't recall.
Now, when you went in, when they sent you out on one of these missions, would they have an LZ for you or clearing to go into, or would you have to rappel down, or what did you do?
Either one of those, but mostly they had a landing zone picked out, and our CO would be a colonel, and he would fly at about 3,000 feet, and he would pick out a landing zone for the Blues to land. And let's say this was first light. Let's say we're moving out at first light in the morning. The gunships would prep the landing zone, and we'd land with 2, 3, or 4 helicopters. The helicopters would never land, by the way. They would slow down, and we developed this technique whereby we could jump off that helicopter without tipping it over. I mean, you got to be careful, because if everybody on one side jumps off, that helicopter tips. So we had these numbers, and you go 1, 2, 3, and 4, and by that time you ought to have, you know, 8 guys off that helicopter in sequence, and the helicopter would maybe be 6, 8, 10 feet off the ground, depending upon the terrain, and they would wheel in there at about 80 knots or 100 miles an hour, and they'd come to get slow as they could, but they wouldn't stop, and then they'd hear the numbers count, and they'd give her the gas and pull the collector up, and away they'd go again. And we never wanted those helicopters to land, because it was too difficult for them to take off again. It's too slow. Our helicopter pilots never carried a weapon. They never carried a gun, nothing. They knew they were safe with us around. And so we took care of those guys and they took care of us.
Do they have door gunners?
No.
Okay. Are these early model Hueys or something else?
I suppose, no, they were considered early model Hueys, yeah.
Because some of those had less power than ones that came in later and harder time taking off.
That's correct. Yeah, they were the early models.
All right. But at this point, they're not doing double duty as gunships or whatever. Which they would do later.
Those are more powerful ones and they could carry more ammo. These Hueys could only handle two pilots and 7 or 8 troops because we were loaded up with ammo and food.
Right.
And they drop us off and they're gone.
Yeah. Now, was there a trick to jumping off from 6 or 8 or 10 feet in the air without twisting an ankle or something?
Not really. I mean, you could roll. I mean, it depends where you were, what kind of terrain. Sometimes you hit and roll. Sometimes you could hit and run. I mean, I never knew of anybody that got hurt jumping off.
Okay.
So I mean, I've heard people getting punchy sticks and stuff like that, but I never. None of our guys ever did.
Okay. Now, was it common to land in a hot LZ, or did they normally put you in where no one was shooting at you initially?
That was about 50-50. First of all, knowing that we're going after where we know there's enemy action. We know they're just not going to put us someplace quiet, like a candy store. They're going to put us in a place where the bad guys are. We've seen the bad guys. We know they're there. We're going to put the blues in and see what we can find out. Let's stir up some trouble here and see what's going on. If the blues can take care of it, nice day. If they can't take care of it, we're going to pile on. And so that's how our days would start. And some of those were quiet LZs and some of them were hot. I'd say it was 50-50.
Would you sometimes take in a fire going in that the pilots would just pull back out again? Or would they almost always drop you off?
We never aborted.
Okay.
We never aborted a flight, even to the detriment of the team. I mean, we had birds shot down all the time, and that was okay. You know, that just part of that was okay.
All right.
But I do remember when I first got there, there's a difference. Even my first week or two, I noticed the attitude of the young troopers. They took it for granted when we would go into a hot LZ, and these young guys would be out maybe on an ambush all night, and the first light they got to be out on the aircraft again. And so they'd be tired from being out all night. And so I remember when I first got there, I couldn't believe that these guys were standing on the skids, were coming into an LZ, they're shooting at us, and they're sleeping. They're hanging on this thing, and it's such a mundane, everyday act that they're trying to catch 30 seconds of shut-eye. I'm thinking, you're kidding me. These people, they're going to kill you. They're shooting at us. And then after you do that for a few weeks, you understand that, holy God, they just wore you down. We were wore out. We were wore down. And so then after a while, I understood why those guys would catch those naps. And I hasten to say also, when I first got there, I think I was the only white guy in my squad. And then by the time I left, there might have been 1 or 2 black guys in the squad. It's mostly white. I mean, if we talk about stuff like that, I mean, that's a fact. That's how it was.
Yeah, and with that small a number of people, there's a lot of different range for what can happen. But
Yeah.
Now, when you land, let's say you land in a situation where you're not getting shot at right away. Now, do you head off down trails? Do you have directions you're supposed to go in, or?
Yeah, we would have a mission. Let's say, every squad had a radio in our squad, and then the lieutenant had 2 radios. So he was talking to the aircraft above, plus he'd be talking to the other squads.
Right.
And so we'd have our mission. We know, okay, we're gonna land in this landing zone, and the day before or 2 days before, we saw some uniformed NVA in this village. So we're going to land in this landing zone, and we're going to work our way into the village, and we're going to see what's going on. Or if it was in the mountains, we'd say, okay, there was a hut over here And 2 nights ago there was smoke coming out of the roof, so somebody was cooking. And let's go check out, see what that smoke is coming from. Well, that may be the Onlo Valley, the Oshaw Valley, or the Idrang Valley. One of those three. That was where I worked out of. I mean, I spent 90% of my time in the valleys, and those are a lot of fun in there. You know you're going to get your money's worth at the end of the day. So yeah, we'd find out where we saw this suspicious activity, and then they'd put the blues in and check it out.
Right.
And then when we check it out, we had to handle it. And if you can't handle it, then they call in reinforcements and artillery and airstrikes. I mean, we call in airstrikes every day, just every day.
So your squad is going in. You've got mostly small, really small arms. Did you bring an M60 with you, or?
One guy carried an M60.
Okay. So you have some firepower if you need it.
Yeah. So and everybody carried 200 rounds for this M60. So he could go through the. We always had to get new ammo. I mean, he'd run through that M60 5 or 6 times a day. You know, so they drop ammo off to us and all the time. Grenades. We run through 10 grenades a piece a day, and oh yeah.
Right. And when you run into opposition and so forth, and it's something bigger than you can take care of yourselves, do they have you just stay where you are, or do you pull back, or what?
Well, it depends. Sometimes when you can't take care of yourself and you're pinned down, you can't move. And so we were, in our outfit, in the 1st and the 9th, we were pretty high powered.
Yeah.
And so we had our own gunships, and our gunship pilots, they knew us by name.
Yeah.
They weren't going to leave us out there alone. They're going to come in hot. And they always called in other gunship pilots to help us. When we got going, they knew that they weren't going to leave us out there to get overrun. So every day we could have been overrun. I mean, that was just how it is. But we had so much firepower. We had a forward observer with us, and a forward observer. We were all linked in before we left. We had those coordinates all set down, so we got in too big of trouble. We had artillery already aimed right at us, right for us. We could call airstrikes in. We did airstrikes probably 4 or 5 times a week. We had airstrikes come in on us all the time.
And I guess the way this works is, since they were planning this ahead of time, everything is lined up because you guys are going in first. So they know where and when you're going. They can be ready for that on a level that maybe they're not. Say for a bunch of Marines out there wandering in the jungle without a whole lot of support, where it could take a lot longer to get any help to them. But you've got enough firepower available and on call quickly, and you coordinate well enough with them that, yeah, if you do get into trouble, you're not really alone on that level.
Well, there was a total different philosophy of combat with the 1st Cavalry versus the Marines.
Right.
And in the 1st and the 9th versus the other 1st Cavalry. I mean, we were the golden boys. They were trying this thing out to make sure this is the right way to go. And they're not going to let them happen to us if they could. And so they knew that if we were going to make this thing work, that they had to give the 1st and the 9th all the protection that they could muster. And we had a ready reaction force. I'm telling you, every day we had people, a couple hundred people, sitting waiting for us to make contact. And if we started something we couldn't finish, we had a ready reaction force. They determined how many troops we needed. So it was very common for us to start the fight, and pretty soon we have somebody from the 1st to the 7th, or the 2nd to the 7th, the 1st to the 8th. And they would put a couple of hundred guys, and they'd come up and say, okay, where's the bad guys? We'd say, there they are, you're right in the middle of it, buddy, have a good one. And then some days they'd say, okay, you guys pull out, 1st to the 9th, you guys go back here, we've got another hot spot over this next mountain range, we're going to want to insert you. So okay, so we get a drink of water, get more ammo, and they'd insert us into another hot landing zone just to keep it going. You know, I mean, who could plan all that? That's amazing. I mean, there was a lot of things being planned, and it was pretty active.
Yeah. Now, would you normally spend the nights back in the base camp, or would you be out in the field most of the time?
Oh, we were out in the field all the time. I never went back to a base camp.
I mean, didn't you have stand-downs periodically, or occasional breaks?
Oh, maybe once a month have a
Yeah.
maybe one have a stand down, maybe, but always something would come over the radio, say, okay, time to rock, saddle up.
All right. Now, would you work out of forward fire bases and go in and out of those?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that was our main places where we would, at night, they'd try to, because we were always in the hot stuff, they didn't want to leave us out there very often at night, if they could, because we were sitting ducks. But they try to pull us back into some small landing zone that had some wire around it, some security. If they could get us there, that was the object. And then that night we'd either have to be on the wire, or we'd have a listening post outside the wire, or an ambush outside the wire. But never were we without those things. So many a time we'd set up an ambush, and my men were so tired that they'd be snoring as soon as they sat down and got in the elephant grass or got in the weeds, and pretty soon you could hear them snoring. And so I can tell who was snoring by the sound of it. I could tell the snores.
Right. Now, would you at least trade off watches so somebody could sleep while somebody else was staying awake?
Oh, absolutely. If there was maybe 8 or 10 of us, we're supposed to have 2 guys awake all night. So, and we knew, actually, the brass would hope everybody would be awake all night, but we could ration this out.
Yeah.
Then it was up to, when I became a staff sergeant, it was up to me to take care of business, and so I would make sure somebody was awake, hopefully all the time. But I guarantee you, there were some times out there everybody was sleeping.
All right. Now, when you're out in the field, did you normally move on trails?
Yeah, we normally moved on trails. We were quick, and it depended upon the environment, the situation. If this looked too good to be true, chances are it's too good to be true. But let's say we were in one of the valleys, and there's trails. I mean, that's all there is. And so the point man would walk on the trail. We'd put a flanker out on each side. We'd have a helicopter above us, at least one helicopter all the time. And he wouldn't just hang above us, he'd crisscross over a wide area, and so the enemy didn't know for sure where the hell we were. But
you were probably there somewhere, but they weren't pinpointing your location.
They didn't tell us where we were, and then the helicopter above us was a bubble, H-13 they called it, which is one of those slow-moving things. And I don't know how they fly anyway, it's just impossible, but they somehow do. And so they could see what's up ahead, and they could tell if there's any enemy activity. They were flying low. They'd be at treetop level.
Yeah. Well, now, if you're in triple canopy jungle, that might not help too much. But did the forest vary? Was it not always the full rainforest?
Yeah, we didn't get triple canopy all that often. Triple canopy was usually down south, I believe. I saw it a few times, but we didn't have a lot of. They lose track of us in that triple canopy, and nobody wanted to lose track of this group.
All right. Now, were there booby traps on the trails?
Oh yeah, there would be booby traps, and but that was common. But you get a sense of it, and you can feel it, and it's pretty intense. And you can't be thinking about anything stupid when you're walking point or when you're on the trail. And so a young man goes over there 20 years old, and in about a 2-month period of time, he's about 40 years old. And he's really in touch with himself. And he's in touch of his senses and awareness. And you get in trained. That's what you do. And if you're not right, the consequences are tremendous. And so you focus. And if you don't focus, you're gone.
Okay. How long did it take for you to start walking point?
Took about 3 weeks probably.
Okay.
Our point man got hit, which is not unusual. It happens, and then I walked point for the rest of my tour.
So even when you became a squad leader, you were still walking point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's I was born to walk point.
All right. Were there sort of clues or things that you could look for to suspect either an ambush or a booby trap?
Yeah, sometimes, again, it's the terrain. You get a feel for this. This is your life. You get a feel for this. Something's going to happen. and you can smell. Sometimes you can smell the bad guys. I mean, you really get this sense going, and you can smell them. And then you know about where you're at, and you can look around and see what kind of position you're in, and this would be a good place for an ambush, and hang on, because here it comes. And or a booby trap, and booby traps could be any place, but they usually didn't put them out in the middle of no place. You know, booby traps were set in certain places, usually around villages, because they wanted to protect their village. And they would put punji sticks around these villages, so it'd slow you down. And if they could slow you down, they could run out the back door or jump in their tunnels. And you're slowed down. You're going to get in there, but by the time you get in there, they're gone.
Yeah. Now, were there a lot of tunnels in the areas that you were working in, or some and not others, or?
Some areas, not too much in the mountains, but usually along the beaches, and maybe along the plains. There was the tunnels. Mountains, that was hard digging up in there. So I don't remember a lot of tunnels. I remember a lot of spider holes, but not a lot of tunnels in the mountains. There was a couple mountains that were all tunnels. I remember one time we collapsed the whole mountain, filled it full of explosives, and touched it off, and that whole mountain went up and came down. that was a beautiful thing. I led my squad to the top of that mountain. The Marines were standing on the bottom of the mountain, and they inserted my squad and tried to get up to the top of it and see what kind of tunnels we passed. And so we had a few ambushes and a few firefights on the way to the top. By the time we got up there, though, there were 5 of us left, and 2 of us had heat strokes. And so I remember they took me out of the area with on a helicopter, and I put me in I went back to some place in the rear area, probably a hospital of some sort, and they had like an old horse trough, galvanized steel, and it was full of ice. And it put me in this, so I'm laying in this ice trough with some goofy pajamas on of some sort, and I don't know what happened. I forget what happened after that, but that's all I remember.
All right. Now,
I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but
No,
I'm
no,
bringing back some things from the past.
yeah, well, it's all, it's all good. Tape is cheap. So, yeah, whatever you can recall and tell us, we want to get. Now, as best you can, okay, you try to follow a little bit your sequence into Vietnam. You get there, you have a few weeks, you kind of learn the ropes, you start walking point. We're now kind of getting toward 67, and because I guess you were still in the Pleiku area or whatever when Bob Hope came through at Christmas.
Yeah.
All right, and then as going to get into 67 and so forth. At some point, you wind up becoming what, assistant squad leader, or how does that work?
Yeah, that somewhere I know I was out on the flank, and so I think they made me an E3 when I after I was there for a couple weeks, and that was a big deal for me. And then they had me. Well, one of the sergeants had gotten killed, and so they had me take his spot. And I think that was out on the flank. And then we had a firefight and most of the guys got either wounded or killed. And our squad leader was wounded. In fact, I carried him off the. I think it was in the Anlo Valley, or Ashaw Anlo, one of those valleys. And I carried the squad leader back on my shoulders, and he got hit again. While I was carrying him, he got shot again. And that was Sergeant Swanson. And I don't know if he ever lived or died. I don't remember. I don't even know how bad he was. I mean, it didn't look all that bad, but who knows? I don't know how. He wasn't talking, I know that, but I mean, there wasn't a lot of blood and guts and things that I've seen, but I could hear him getting thumped. And then there was I was the old man. So now I'm in E4.
Okay. Now, how long had you been in country?
3-4 months.
Okay.
And so they had me in an E6 slot now. And I was at E4. And And so they said, well, you're going to have to be a sergeant. They made me E5.
Yeah.
So, all right, now I'm a sergeant. Well, within a very short period of time, the lieutenant got whacked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have any lieutenants, so they put me in a captain slot. And I was just turned E5
Mm-hmm.
until they had a new lieutenant come in.
Right.
And so for a couple of weeks, I was the platoon leader, which is kind of unusual. And there were a few sergeants in our B troop
Mm-hmm.
that were career military men,
Mm-hmm.
E6, E7s, and I was asked to be the platoon leader until we got a new platoon leader. So the career sergeants didn't really they didn't care for it, or they were happy they didn't want that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I know there was a little rub there.
Do the career guys have what amounted to more support type positions, where they weren't necessarily flying missions all the time?
No, these E7s, E6s, and E7s were squad leaders,
Okay.
and they weren't even platoon leaders.
Mhm.
Or platoon sergeants.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't make them platoon sergeants. So for a couple of weeks I was in a captain slot. Then I went back down to the first squad
Mm-hmm.
in an E6 slot, and I was still E5.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then in a couple months, the E7 came to me and he said, "Mac, we're going to make you a E6."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, holy cow! Who ever thought of that?" He said, "Well, that's how it goes." So
Mhm.
next thing you know, they pinned a E6 on me,
Mm-hmm.
and so now I'm making $600 a month, which included jump pay and
Mm-hmm.
hazardous duty pay and combat pay and demolition pay and I don't know, all that other stuff.
Now, were you having a lot of that sent home?
All of it.
Okay.
I sent all of my money home. We lived off the land, and there was no stores. We didn't need any money. But sometimes the bad guys would have money on them. So we would tell the new guys, when you get in a firefight, don't shoot them in the pocket because there's money in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of these guys had little pockets up here
Mhm.
and here. And so we were trained, don't shoot them in the pocket. And then sometimes there was gold teeth, and sometimes there were gold earrings that could be traded for various things.
All right. And now, who were you fighting most of the time?
Well, we were a pretty aggressive outfit, so we were fighting Kong. I mean, we were fighting every day, so
Mhm.
who knew? I mean, sometimes it's the Viet Cong, sometimes it's the NVA.
Mm-hmm.
There
you
were
check-
uniforms every day, and there were sandals every day, there were pajamas. I don't
Mhm.
know. I'd say it's mostly Viet Cong, but if we were going to go 10 days, I'd say we'd have 4 days or 5 days, at least 4 days of NVA.
Mm-hmm. Now, would the NVA consistently wear uniforms, or is that how you told them apart?
Not consistently,
Okay.
but on occasion they'd have NVA backpacks,
Mm-hmm.
NVA weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, our job was intelligence, so
Mhm.
we'd figure out, it'd come down, okay, we think we got an NVA division here,
Yeah.
an NVA regiment here, go check it out.
Now, did you have missions like that where they really didn't want you to get into a firefight, but just go in, get information, and get back out again?
Not very often, I can't recall that. We were supposed to start a fight.
Okay. Because there were some kinds of recon squads or whatever where their job description was a little bit different. It was just go and get out, but they tended not to carry M60s either. So.
Well, that did happen. One time we were in Cambodia, and we were not supposed to get in a ruckus.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that, but somehow we were compromised, and we got in a little firefight, and we killed 6 Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
and they were in uniform,
Mm-hmm.
and they were Chinese uniform,
Mhm.
and we had to take pictures, and so the old man was up there at 3,000 feet. wanted to know who has a camera. Well, I always carried a camera. I said, I want pictures of these guys and weapons. So I kept their weapons, and one of them had pearl-handled revolvers. And we had to take their backpacks and all the stuff they had with them. And then we took their brass off their uniforms. So they were officers of some sort. And they were all, the key thing here is they were all over 6'2". They were the biggest Asians I ever saw. And it came back afterwards, okay, you guys really did this time. Now you killed like 6 or 8 Chinese guys. So, oh my God, now we're all in trouble again.
Yeah, but the Chinese guys weren't supposed to be there either.
No, so it was a bad, unlucky day, I guess.
Now, was it common to cross the border and go into Cambodia or into Laos, or was that just an unusual thing?
It was unusual. I mean, our pilots would stray across on occasion, and then they'd come back, and they'd radio down to me and say, oh my God, we're over in Cambodia, we got to get back out of here. I said, well, geez, if you get shot down, then I got to come and get you out. So take it easy on me, man. I mean, we would talk back and forth like this, Don't get your tail shot off.
Okay, well, this tape is just about. All right, now as your kind of tour in Vietnam progressed and you're kind of finding yourself a squad leader and so forth, getting into firefights of various sorts on a pretty regular basis, you got a number of different decorations at certain points. You got 2 silver stars and a bronze star, and you've got the citations and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about what happened in those instances?
Well, gosh, I can't recall actually. Maybe that should be read off at some particular time. But
okay.
I think the first silver star, I remember that we were in a valley, and we were ambushed, and my squad leader was wounded, and all the other guys were wounded. And myself and another guy were the only ones that weren't dead or wounded, and I was giving first aid to the guys around me. I mean, all I was doing was trying to stop the bleeding and drag them out of the killing zone, and trying to help get them back here. It's interesting, the only other guy left was in fact, as I was only a Spec 4 at the time, or maybe an E3, I can't recall.
I think you were a Spec 4, at least that's how the citation reads.
And the other guy that was left alive was our supply sergeant. And he had came out to the field the day before, and for some reason, he had asked me, he was a E6, and had been in the military, 6 or 7 years, and I'd only been in about a year or 18 months or something, or less than 18 months, probably a year. And he asked me if he could go out with my squad, because he wanted to get his combat infantry badge, and the Army was his career. And so he asked if he could go out with me, and I said, man, the supply sergeant coming out with this group of idiots, are you kidding? He said, no, he wanted to do it. I guess you had to go in combat for 30 days, I think, to earn a CIB. So I said, all right, if you want to go, come along. It's fun. We can always use an extra hand. And so he and I were the only 2 left after about 15 minutes. And then I told him that we're going to have to get these bad guys, and they're in these big rocks. And I remember telling Sergeant Sink you take the high ground, I'll take the low ground, and you can walk above these bad guys on these big rocks, and when you can shoot down, and you got a better shot. Okay, so I'll take the hard way, and then I'll walk real slow, and we'll see what shakes out of here. And so he got somebody, he killed a guy, and then I just stayed real soft and quiet for a minute. I walked around a rock, and then I heard an AK-47 crack, and I heard and I interpreted that as Sergeant Sink being shot by an AK-47. And then I heard a M16 plastic shell falling through the rocks from above down. So I suspected that he'd been killed. And in fact, he was. And so now I'm the only one left on these rocks. And so I'm thinking, this is going to be interesting today. And so after, I don't know, I can't understand time and stuff, but after a period of time, there's movement in these rocks, and I'm trying to filter through here and stay alive and kill as many of them as I can kill. And as a matter of fact, I saw this bad guy coming down through the rocks backwards. And so I said, okay, I'm going to get this guy. And then I saw another guy out of the corner of my eye over here coming through these other rocks. He's got a weapon, and he's got his weapon, but this guy's looking up, and this guy's looking at me. So I'm going to do something real quick. And so I shot that guy, and then this guy turned on, I got him. And then all hell broke loose. There was a whole bunch of funny guys happening in there, and then I got hit in the knee with a ricochet, some bullets. And I remember we had some reinforcements finally got to me, and I looked over, and over this little rock, a little boulder, was my old buddy Baines. I forget his first name, but he was a black guy. And he was E6 at the time, and he had a different squad. I really admired Baines. His nickname was Bang Bang Baines. And Bang Bang Baines looked up at me and he smiled. I remember his white teeth. He smiled at me and he's laughing, and he found me. And him and I cleaned up that whole deal after that. And I'll never forget Baines. In fact, down at Fort Knox, Kentucky, there's a building named after him. Baines had a Silver Star, and that was a big deal. And he got sent home, and he got killed on the highway. I think some auto accident, and the military named a building after him because he was held in such high regard by the military. And what a great guy he was. I've not seen that building, but if I ever get back to Fort Knox, I want to see Baines' building.
All right.
So that's how I don't know how it ended after that. I remember Bang Bang Baines smiling, and we stacked a bunch of bodies up, and somehow they dragged me out of there, and I can't remember much after that.
Okay. All right. And I think the second second Silver Star was when you got after you were a squad leader.
I forgot what happened there. What happened? Oh, that was on May. I mean, these things happened every day.
Yeah.
And so there were the guys I could have gotten Silver Stars every day. I mean, that's such a wonderful group and a heroic group. All heroes, every one of these guys. But this was in May, and we had followed some commo wire into a village, and my squad was not walking point. We just got off the helicopters, and the pilots had saw a commo wire leading in the village. Well, when you see a commo wire, that's a big deal. That's just not a bunch of little Viet Cong hanging out. We got an NVA command post of some sort here. So we said, we're going to go check it out. Well, here we go. And so I was walking on the left flank with Blue 3-1. Blue 3-2 went down the trail. Into the village. Well, they got into the village and they sprung the ambush. And about of that squad, I think 3 or 4 guys got killed right away. A couple were wounded. They got dragged out. We had a firefight that lasted for most of that afternoon, and we ran out of ammo and water, and it was 100 degrees. And we're getting reinforcements coming behind us all the time, and plus we get airstrikes brought in, napalm was brought in. Well, that was afterwards. During this particular part of that battle, a relief helicopter was flying in to drop us off ammo. And our machine gunner was out of ammo. We were in tough shape right there. We're all out. And here comes a helicopter in, and I don't know what outfit he was with, but he wasn't with the 1st and the 9th. In fact, he was with the 147th Aviation. He came in, and they were kicking ammo out, and he was like 100 feet off the ground, and he was flying between me and the bad guys. And so the bad guys shot him down. Well, now this helicopter guy's down. The crew chiefs were not strapped in. They jumped out and run. They run to me. In the meantime, I look over here, and the helicopter's on fire now, and the ammunition is cooking off, and no pilots. The pilots are out cold or wounded, I don't know which, and they're hanging upside down in this helicopter. Well, I see that, and the door gunners are running towards me, and so I'm running towards them. I said, well, we got to get the pilots out of there. And so me and two guys, we cut the pilots out. And we dragged them back to our, we had a little indentation there in the ground, a little ditch-like, and we put these guys in the ditch. And well, I could hear the bullets hitting the helicopters. We were dragging them, trying to cut them out, but somehow we got them out and carried them back and safely. I don't know if they were alive or dead. We handed them off to some reinforcements that came behind us. And I remember this young reinforcement guy, I don't know where the hell he was from, he must have been new. He comes running out there and he's standing up and he grabbed the body and he's trying to pull the body back and he's standing up and we said, get down, get down. Boom, I saw his chest blew up. And boom, he's down. And at the same time I'm looking over and there's some reinforcements coming in. And some guy was standing on the helicopter on the skid. And he got shot right out of the helicopter, and I saw him fall. He fell about 100 feet, and boom, bounced. And there's a lot of bullets flying around that particular day. But that's what happened. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But,
all right. Now you've got yourself 3 Purple Hearts.
Yeah.
And you talk about what happened to you on any of those occasions.
Well, I can't recall. Well, I got that one in the knee, the ricochet, and I got another shrapnel in the foot, my ankle. I don't know how that happened. It never worked out until I was out of the military about 5 or 6 years, and I was taking a shower, and I was washing my ankle, and some metal fell out of my ankle right on the porcelain bathtub. And clean that. I'll be damned. It did work out.
Yeah.
And so it worked out. Another time I had a hand grenade go off in my face. A bad guy threw this hand grenade and it was a dud. And poof, and blew a bunch of stuff in my face. And then I didn't, so it's hot. And I didn't. But the blood was coming down, and my buddies thought I was dying. I couldn't feel anything. I'm okay. And so I go like this. I said, holy cow, what's going on here?
Did they medevac you for that one? Or?
Yeah, they did. As a matter of fact, but I wasn't hurt, but they told me, you got to go. So I said, all right, I'm bleeding, I better go. So I jumped in this helicopter, and the helicopter didn't want to land because they were still fighting. And if you, I'll tell you what, medevac would not come unless there was no fire for 20 minutes. Well, that's bullshit in my world. I mean, you got to get on there.
So one of your own choppers came in? Or?
Yeah, my own chopper, Maryline. Kid named Maryline from New Jersey came. He flew in. I dove on the helicopter. He picked me up. And so we're heading down through this river. We're going 100 miles an hour. And there's this bridge coming up. And I'm still laying on my stomach. And we're looking at this bridge coming up. I think, come on, pull up. Come on, let's get up here. He ran right underneath the bridge. I'm telling you, that wasn't a high bridge. I swear to God, there's about this much between the water and the skids, and then the propeller on top and the bridge. I said, you're gonna kill me. He didn't kill me.
Yeah.
And he'd never done that before. Oh, Christ.
Yeah, that could give you a more serious injury than any of the rest of them you picked up.
That's Maryland.
Yeah. Now, did you ever get R&R or any kind of break out of the field?
Yeah, I got one R&R. I guess I was supposed to get 2, but I got 1. They wouldn't let me go. But I got R&R to Bangkok, Thailand, and it was a week. And I got put in jail for 2 nights, so I didn't have a full R&R.
And what was it like just to be out of a combat zone for?
Well, it's never land. You just think, well, first of all, you go over there, it's, boy, I'm lucky to have this great experience. And then when all of a sudden, after about 3 weeks, you say, well, I'm going to die. Because who's going to get out of this outfit? These guys are suicidal. I mean, home. They're gonna get killed. So if you have any money, you spend it. And I bought. I remember there was some sugar cane, and they had those wagon with it pulled by a donkey, and a guy was selling sugar cane on the street to people. So I bought the whole deal, and him and I went around. I gave sugar cane to everybody, to the little kids, and they had it in ice and stuff. And I mean, I don't know. I had a couple of $100, and after I got out of jail and went back to my unit, why I was broke, of course. What am I going to do with money anyway? You know, didn't make sense to me. So that was my R&R.
Was it hard to get on the plane to go back?
Took back to Vietnam?
Yeah.
No, I was in jail, man. I have to get out of it. Out of a Thailand jail.
All right.
No, I didn't belong in jail anyway. But I had a little trouble in a nightclub, and of course that was my middle name. See, so I was somehow they had a big glass door. Well, I came from a farm in Michigan. We had glass in our windows, but there was no wall made out of glass. Well, I walked through this wall and it knocked the whole damn thing down and cut my head, and then the police came, and so we had a disagreement about who's going to pay for the wall, and so I didn't go to jail.
Oh, well.
That's a long time ago, man.
Now, did they just decide on their own to let you go, or did someone have to come find you? Or?
No, they knew. I probably wasn't the first GI that had ever had a problem with the law.
Yeah.
And so I had my papers, and they knew on such and such a day I'm supposed to be at the airport, and police had me at that airport at that spot with my papers and get him out of here. And I was back to my outfit, and the boys wanted to know how'd it go. I said, well, it went pretty good most of the time, but I did have to go to jail for a while.
All right. Now, when you got new guys coming into your squad, did you make an effort yourself, especially when you were squad leader, to make sure that you showed them the ropes or what was going on?
Yeah, well, you feel obligated to do that. I have some regrets about that. We were supposed to be military intelligent, but we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And now they train their NCOs a lot better, and they're more cognizant of what's going on, and history and languages and everything. So,
well, you hadn't gone to NCO school, so
I had not gone to NCO school. I
or
had
taken any tests. Yeah.
No, hell no. I didn't know the chain of command. But I would start off when I was looking for a guy for my squad. He had to be a special guy because we walk point. So back at the home base in Ankei, I had this big tent, and where the young guys would come into the unit, they had a bunk. There was a bunk in there, several bunks, but my bunk was the first bunk. And there was a sign up there that said Sergeant McAlpine. And he'd be told, these kids would be told, you can sleep anywhere, but don't sleep in McAlpine's bunk. Because if he catches you in the air, you're in trouble. He's gonna kick your butt. Well, I'd go back there and I'd find out if anyone was sleeping in my cot after they were told not to. And that's the kind of guy I want to talk to. See, that guy's got a lot of balls sleeping in my tent or my cot. So that'd be the first guy I'd interview, and I'd tell him I just saved your life because I was just going to kill you, but I saved your life. Come with me. And that's how we'd start our relationship. Then I'd train him as best I could, and every day school. Every day's intense.
Okay. Now, how often would you get back to Ankei?
Well, I'd get back. If I needed a replacement, they could get me back for a couple hours. But I think I only went back. They kicked me out of Ankei. So I was told by a general never to come back. He was going to put me in jail. So I got back about 3-4 times max. Gosh, what was I going to go with this one? I don't know.
Well, I was just asking, getting back into a base camp and would you just go in very briefly and do your business and leave, or stay a few nights? Or?
No, I could only. I got to get back to my outfit because if I'm not there, they're going to die. I mean, I had this feeling that they can't carry on without me, and so of course that's false. They sure as hell did when I left. But there was such a bond that I had and an obligation for these young kids that I felt that we all had to be on our toes 100% of the time. So I'd go back and get my people, my replacements, that was all. I'd get 2 or 3 replacements and back out, we'd catch a helicopter. I'd have a helicopter at my disposal.
Mm-hmm.
Say, okay, McAlpine, you're going, yeah, go back here.
Mm-hmm.
Take your time. Well, I'd just go hook them up and jump. Let's come with me. Get a helicopter, go back out to our unit.
Yeah, because the distances weren't necessarily all that great as the bird flies anyway.
Right.
From Ankei to the base camps where it might feel like you're in different planets maybe sometimes for being shot at or not, but
We were probably by air 20 minutes.
Yeah.
To the Bongsong Valley, Bongsong Plains.
now you would have spent a lot of your time. I mean, Ankei is in the Central Highlands, the Second Corps area,
Yeah.
but you also got up into I Corps, up into the northern part for a while too.
Yeah, well, Camp Evans and typhoons and things. But let me tell you about this. Oh, I got kicked out of Ankei.
Mm-hmm.
We had we were on an ambush one night, and my squad was supposed to go on the west side of this village, and Billy's, I'm sorry, I won't say the name, Billy somebody took his squad on the other side. And that night, I remember talking on our radios and said, okay, no more radio silence now, radio silence, can't just squelch. If you got any problems, squelch me. So we didn't hear any problems. Well, Billy got involved. He saw some bad guys coming into the village. It turned out to be a wedding. So him and his boys said, oh, okay, they're going to the village too. They didn't know it was a wedding. They just said, the bad guys are going in there, we're going in. So they went in this wedding. They had their knives. So it was okay. I mean, we killed people with knives. I mean, we had ears and things. Everything goes. So Billy took his boys in there, and it was a wedding, and they killed the VCs. And then they shaved the head of the bride. I think they raped a couple of the ladies. They threw the bad guys into the well, and they threw grenades after them. And I mean, that's normal stuff, okay? Now, I know it doesn't seem normal, but that's what we did. Mm-hmm. And now we didn't, the rape and stuff, not normal. Mm-hmm. But killing people and throwing them in a well, or throwing a grenade in a well, mm-hmm. and messing up the whole water supply is mm-hmm. what we did. And we'd just burn the village. Mm-hmm. I was not discouraged, I was encouraged. So Billy goes in there and leaves and comes out. So we meet back at in the wire before daylight. So I talked to him in the wire. So how'd it go? No problems, normal. Okay. So a couple days later, I got wounded. So I was in the hospital, and apparently there was this girl that got married. Her father was the village chief. Mm-hmm. The village chief makes a report now to the MACV. MACV mm-hmm. calls up the CAV that's in the mm-hmm. 2 Corps. CAV comes to 1st and the 9th. Okay, mm-hmm. 1st and 9th, who's out there? Well, B Troop. Okay, who's with B Troop? Well, 3-1 and 3-2. We're on an ambush by mm-hmm. this village that night. Goes on after action reports. Mm-hmm. So I get back to my outfit after about 2 weeks of healing up from a shrapnel, and I get up there and I know they're standing lineup. My squad and Billy's squad are standing lineups because we were the squads out there. Mm-hmm. And this girl came to identify who did it. And so at that time, Captain Chilcote, who was an attorney, graduated from Texas A&M, he was supposed to be the blue platoon leader, but they took him back after 6 months. They didn't want him out there anymore. Mm-hmm. So he was in the rear. He told me, McAlpine, I don't want you standing in lineup. I said, well, why not? He said, never mind, you just don't go in the lineup. Well, I was in the hospital anyway, so I said, all right, I'm not here. So I ducked around the corner. And anyway, the girl came and identified Billy and his squad as the bad guys, and my squad was off the hook. Mm-hmm. Well, Smitty denied it. They denied everything. Mm-hmm. The captain said, well, look, it's your word against hers, so I don't know how this is going to go. Well, at that time, a guy named I won't say his name, but his last name, it started with an R. He identified himself. He was in the squad. He was a CID, which was, it was a criminal investigation division of some sort. He was sent there by our government because of our outfit. Our group was kind of notorious. So Mr. R, who's a Spec 4, was there, and he walked forward and stepped up and says, well, he identified himself, said, I'm with CID, and yes, in fact, this squad did that. Holy cow, that's when the shit hit the fan. Smitty was then arrested, but the MPs, now we were out in the field, the MPs won't come out there because now they're afraid of Smitty, and so the division asked my squad to guard Billy's squad. So nobody else saw. So we're out in the boonies. So I say, okay, Billy, first of all, you could get your guns back. So we all sat around this big tent, and everybody stayed away from us. And I gave them the guns back, and then we played cards for about 3 or 4 days. And then pretty soon the MPs came out, like I'm talking about 30, 40 of them, and they were afraid of us. But Smitty did surrender and went back, and last I knew he was sentenced in Fort Leavenworth to, I think, 35 years or something like that. And so we drew straws on who's going to go back to the rear area and kill Mr. R. So, since I'm the squad leader, I control the straws. So somehow I got the short straw. And my job was to go back to On K. So I go to the MPs. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying to scope out to see, I'm just seeing what's going on, so if I can find my man. And right in front of me walked my best friend from high school. He was over there as an MP, and so he came over and talked to me, and he said, he said, gee, Barry, how you doing? How's everything going? I said, well, I'm having a good time. He said, well, what outfit you with? I told him. He said, well, we've been reading about you in the paper and all that stuff because the Detroit Free Press had done a couple articles on me, and then he said, well, how far were you with again? I said, well, B Troop 1st to the 9th, and I saw the light go on. And so he said, well, look, can I go get you a cold Coca-Cola or something? And just wait right here. So I said, yeah. So he came back with 4 MPs. And they just said, come with us. And they just escorted me to this general's tent. And it was the only time I ever met a general. First time. And so he had me come in, and he interviewed me for a minute. He wanted to know about what I was doing there. And I said, I was lost. He said, well, I don't think so, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, I think you're here for a reason. And he said, what do you want to know about my men? How's your men? I said, well, they're the best men in the world. They're highly skilled. He said, how's their morale? I said, morale? We're having more fun. We're hunting. We're camping. We're hiking. This is the best thing you do. Now, our morals are not good, but our morale is high. I said, we shoot people like they're dogs. I mean, I come from a farm. If a dog don't hunt, he's gone. And I said, that's what's happening. And I said, sir, when 30 years when we have to go back to this country, I don't know what it's going to be like with all these kids seeing what we're doing. I mean, this don't sit right. So he said, okay, and blah, blah, blah. Gave me a hell of a lecture. He told me if I ever come back to the rear area on K again, he's going to put me in jail. And he said, you never want to see my face again. Told this guy, take him to the helicopter. They had a helicopter waiting. It was a night flight by then, but you didn't do a lot of night flying unless it was important. Night flight out of there, back to my unit. Never went back to on K again. That was it.
Yeah. So they saved you from something uglier.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I could have done all right. I don't doubt my skills. I do now, but in those days, I'm was pretty good at what I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
Took me a long time to get over that, by
Yeah.
the way.
I would think that readjusting to being a civilian would be something else.
Took me a long time to get over that urge to settle that score,
Mm-hmm.
but I did, and I regret that I even thought those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a whole different world,
Yeah.
and then you don't even know. There's no rules, and you're 21 years old. And you're a gunslinger.
Now, most of the time when you were out in the field, were you away from civilian populations? Were you kind of mostly just out in the jungle, or were there villages in most of the places you went?
There are villages, a lot of villages. Yeah, we're busting villages every day.
Now, did you get into any of the Montagnard villages, or were those? Okay. And was that a different experience from being in a Vietnamese one?
Well, yeah, Montagnards. There was not much enemy action in the Montagnard villages.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were friendly. I admired them,
Mm-hmm.
and I was back to one 4 or 5 years ago. Same old, it looks the same.
Mm-hmm.
It brought back fond memories. But no, Montagnards were fine. The villages were peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
There was no booby traps or ambushes. We didn't have to have any problems.
Now, did the NVA and VC leave them alone?
I don't think they left them alone per se. I think they harassed them all the time, but I don't think they really set up warfare against the Montagnards. They tolerated them, but they didn't like them.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Montagnards would side with us, I
Yeah.
think, most of the time.
Because they're ethnically different from the Vietnamese and weren't treated that well by them anyway.
Right. They were among them. You could tell a difference in how they walked. You could, by their legs. The Montagnards had legs like this. Huge. And feet. Big, flat, fat feet. Holy cow. The heads were different.
All right. Now, I had asked a little bit earlier there before we got to finish the on case story about kind of changing areas of operation. I mean, does the squadron move eventually out of 2 Corps into I Corps, or do you just go back and forth? Or?
Well, late in my tour, they moved our camp back up to I Corps, to Camp Evans, and I left shortly thereafter.
Okay.
So I don't remember much about Evans.
That. All right. Now, when you were in the different camps and places where you were staying overnight, was it normal to get mortar attacks or things like that?
I think we only got mortared a couple times.
Okay.
We didn't get a lot of mortars. Well, no, I take that back. When we were up in northern 2 Corps, man, I forget this place. I'll think of it in a minute. But the bad guys were up, and we had a big ammo dump, and we just took over from the Marines, and they had a whole bunch of Marines in this place, and they couldn't get out of their perimeter, and they were mortared, 3-4 nights a week. So we get in there, and they landed the 1st and the 9th, just us. And so we were, the bad guys had never seen nothing like that before. All these helicopters, all these guys jumping out and shooting and carrying on. I mean, what a bunch of cowboys this was. And so the bad guys, we were killing 100 a day, and they would maybe get one of us. I mean, there's a kill ratio. I've got statistics about that. And so it was kind of easy hunting up there. But they started mortaring us, and because they were used to that. The Marines just didn't go after them like we did. So I took my squad out. We got mortared, and I took my squad out, and we found the mortar tubes that night. Now here we are in the high ground around this camp. They built the camp in this valley, for God's sake, and it was a bad spot for this camp. And our ammo dump was there, and they blew that up early before daylight one morning. And so me and my squad left our perimeter and immediately went up there and tried to find them at night. Now here we are walking around in Indian country, and but we did find them. We found the mortars, but we didn't find the bad guys.
Yeah.
But we destroyed the mortars, and then we kind of hung out there for a night or two. We kind of slipped back in there at night, hoping we'd catch them in that area. But they knew there's a whole new sheriff in town, and they never mortared us again. But they did blow up that ammo dump, and it was so black the next day. The total sun, it was like an eclipse. The whole sun was blacked out. Couldn't see. It was amazing. I thought, oh my God, it's Armageddon. It's the end of the world.
Now, does the ammo take a while to cook off and keep generating more smoke, or just left over from the original blast?
It cooked off for probably 4 or 5 hours. It was black smoke, terrible black smoke. I don't know what all was in it. I'm sure jet fuel and ammo and white phosphorus and grenades and rockets, and I don't know what all was in there, but it was the blackest damn thing I ever saw. Yep.
All right. Now, as you kind of got toward the end of the tour, I mean, did you start to kind of count down and think of it that way, or were you not paying too much attention?
Well, I knew I was going to go home. Young guys were extending and staying, and no one. The pilots all had. They were allowed. In fact, they were asked to go back to the rear area 30 days before they were to rotate.
Right.
The infantry ground scouts, we didn't have that luxury, so we never knew exactly when we were going to go. I remember the day that the first sergeant met me on the flight line. It was just getting daylight, and we were heading out for our first mission, and the first sergeant came and said, "Hey, Mac, you're done. You're not going out today. It's all over." And I started crying. I couldn't believe that I made it. I did. I thought, my damn, I made it. And so I cried. And the guys, I said goodbye as they're flying off. I shook the guy's hand closest to me, and I love you guys. I'll talk to you when I talk to you. You know, write me, send letters. You know, that was it. So, geez, it was pretty sad. I went back to On K now, where the general told me he was going to put me in jail if he ever found me. So I told the captain at the rear area, I said, I'm going to stay in a bunker. I made it this far. I can't believe it. Just bring me beer and food. I'll pee around the corner. And so he did. He brought me beer and food. Well, I got so drunk that I missed my ride to the airport the next day. So he came in and found me, and I said, "Mac, you missed your ride." He said, "Oh, I get you to the airstrip." So I said, "Okay, man." And I stumbled and bumbled, and I mean, I'm not in training for that stuff, you know. What the hell? All I remember is they threw me on this caribou, and I got the hell out of there, and I don't know how all I know is I got at Fort Lewis, Washington, and I don't know much else about it. I still had the shoulder holster with a live weapon and live ammo, and here I am. And now I was the highest ranking guy in this barracks. That was a word I forgot about before. I couldn't remember barracks. I was the highest ranking guy in this barracks, and they had me in charge of everybody for formation in the morning. Well, I'd have been in charge of a barracks formation, but I remember seeing how they did it in Germany. So I thought, well, I guess I got to stand out here, and Captain Major comes around and talks to me, and I wasn't looking real good, real spiffy, but that's the first cav.
Yeah.
I mean, that's first of the ninth, and we're not right to start with, and they knew it. So they wanted me to tell my men to police up the area and cigarette butts and stuff. I said, "Nah, Major, we're not policing up a damn thing. We're going back in here. We're going to take a nap." Man, he got mad at me, but he just turned red and started going crazy. And I said, "Look, I don't want to hear it." So I just turned on my men and said, "Fall out." Well, the major just took off. He just walked away. And that's the last time I remember of that.
Did you still have time left on your hitch, or were you pretty much done?
I was done.
Okay.
I think I might have been over a day or two. All I know is I flew from Fort Lewis, Washington to Chicago. From Chicago, I flew to Moline, Illinois. I got a taxi cab from the airport, went to Palmer College. I started Palmer College that day. And my brother, who was going to school there, had me enrolled already. He had my grades from Michigan State and my high school grades. He had them all taken care of. I was already enrolled. I started, boom, there I was.
So had you been kind of corresponding back and forth during your year in Vietnam?
Yeah, with my brother.
All right. And I guess with your unit, so probably mail shows up fairly regularly? Or when you were out in the field, was it more erratic then?
Maybe once a week.
Okay.
We get mail once a week. It was no big deal. We all had bigger fish to fry, and so, I mean, it just wasn't, so you got mail, but no big deal.
Okay, it didn't matter to your unit the way it sometimes mattered to some of them then?
Yeah.
All right. Now, when you're actually out there, are you basically just living off of sea rations most of the time? Or?
Yeah, we had sea rations, and sometimes when we would go to our landing zone for the evening, we'd have a hot meal. They'd make sure, I mean, I remember watching, we'd come in off the flight line and the cooks would just be looking at us. And they'd be shaking their heads at this ragtag group of warriors that would come in off that flight line every day. And I remember I'd always say, you guys can come with us anytime you want. And so, no, we don't want to party that guy. So that was always interesting because we had a little bounce in our step.
Did you have, I mean, were there health issues with the men in the field? I mean, either the jungle rot kind of thing or tropical diseases or that sort of thing?
Everybody had that, but we tried to, not much you can do about it. I mean, but I remember going home and talking to my father after I'd been home about 3 or 4 months and about my bad feet and stuff. He said, man, just wear white socks and forget about it. That's not jungle rot. He said, I have that too on the farm. I said, okay, Dad, whatever. You know, so that was how that went. Yeah, I don't think there are a lot of health issues. I mean, there was.
Did you have problems with things like clean water or that sort of thing?
No, we would always buy streams and rivers, and we always, if we ran out of water, we always took out 2 canteens every day, sometimes 3. And so we all watered up at night, and in the daytime we hydrated well. So we kept our hydration up. That was important.
And you're there for a full year, so you're there through a monsoon cycle or 2. Did those affect the way you operated when you're in the monsoon?
Yeah, you know, because of the helicopters, you know, you couldn't fly. There was a low ceiling. So I remember a couple of times, you know, part of our job also, we'd be out ready to go or in a firefight or just leaving a firefight and some helicopter shot down. We'd have to go secure that helicopter and rescue the pilot and co-pilot. I mean, that was part of our job.
Right.
I mean, every day, well, probably every week we'd have at least 3 or 4 rescue pilots we'd have to pick up and secure the aircraft and fight off the bad guys. I mean, that was just part of the deal. I mean, that's hot LZ when you're running into that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so monsoons prohibited a lot of that stuff. In fact, one of my buddies got shot down and we couldn't rescue him because of the low ceiling, and he ended up getting captured by the NVA, and he spent 6.5 years up in Hanoi Hilton. He's now a medical doctor, practices down in Daytona Beach. Yeah, good guy. But monsoon, we couldn't get him. So he was an officer. So he was our flight surgeon. He was an officer, so he didn't know what to do on the ground. You know, me, I'd be happy. You know, I don't get scared, but he was fearful. So he thought he was going to walk towards the friendlies. Now, if he'd have just stayed by the aircraft and hid, I'd have been there. I'd have got him. But he started walking off, and then he got shot, and everybody else got killed, and he got captured. I mean, he regrets it now, but.
How much turnover was there in your squad over the course of a year? I mean, in principle, anybody who survived a year rotates out, but was it more common for them to leave because they were killed or injured as opposed to finishing their tour?
More common for them to leave because they were wounded. Yeah, that almost everybody got Purple Hearts. I mean, I don't know of anybody in the Blues that didn't get a Purple Heart or 2 or 3. They all did. You know, they all should have got Silver Stars.
Yeah. Doesn't a lot of that depend on whether or not there's an officer around to write something up, or?
It sure does. As a matter of fact, I was written up for the Medal of Honor twice, and it was reduced to Silver Stars. I didn't know that until I was going home, and that captain told me.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know what a Medal of Honor was. I didn't even know what a Silver Star was. I mean, it wasn't in my
Yeah.
world.
It's not what you were out there doing it for.
No, in fact is, who cared?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I still got this thing beaten. I'm the luckiest man in the world, man. I'm happy. I can't wait to get home and see my mom and dad.
Now, when we get you back home, okay, you go in, you start college. Had you been aware at all of an anti-war movement at home while you were there before you left, or do you now become aware of it, or?
Well, we knew a little bit about it, but not too much. And when I got back to start college right away, certainly I couldn't understand this. This is beyond my control. I mean, this had me befuddled.
Mm-hmm.
So at first I tried to go to the demonstrators and ask them why they're demonstrating and what is really actually the problem here. And they couldn't come with any facts or anything except bullshit. And so I would try to talk to them, and it wasn't working. And so I'd have to grab them by the ponytail, and then I'd put them on the cement, and then the police would come, and I would go to jail. And I spent my brother had to get me out of jail a lot of times because I was disrupting. I was physically disrupting these demonstrations, and I would. How can I drive down a road? How can I drive down the street past a post office or a federal building and have these idiots protesting something they know nothing about, and coming through what I had just done? I could not look at myself in the mirror if I didn't go up and address that person or people, not person. There'd be 40 people. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Are you kidding me? And so I'd have to go and talk to them. And in fact, at first I would try to talk to them, and then that never worked. So then I wouldn't even bother talking to them anymore. I just grabbed them. I grabbed their placards and their posters and their poles, and I'd break them. And then I'd just go right after for the biggest, baddest, ugliest one. And I just started off. And we get it done right away. And then the police would be there very shortly, and they knew me by my first name in a short period of time. And they all agreed. They said they understood, but it was against the law, and this is their job.
Now, did you eventually sort of calm down, or did the demonstrations just stop?
Demonstrations stopped. I still haven't calmed down. I still, if you demonstrate, if you try to burn a flag out here and not go by that flag, you got hell to pay. You got a 195-pound old, 66-year-old chiropractor on your case right now, and he's going to stick that burning flag right up your ass. That's not going to happen. I can't look at myself in the mirror. I won't do it.
Now, after you got back, did most people who knew you know that you'd been in Vietnam, and was it something you talked about with people, or did you just keep it to yourself unless asked? Or?
Well, oh man, I never talked about it, but my reputation had preceded me, and on the college campus, one of the administrators had been in the Korean War, and he had a Silver Star, and so I had to go talk to him. There were newspaper articles in the Detroit Free Press. I was on Huntley Brinkley had a award thing, and I mean I never talked, but it was there. And then my brother would say, "Well, Barry was there, and he did this or that." And then when I pledged the fraternity, my brother was in the fraternity, and then they called me Audie Murphy, and I had to throw a bunch of them guys out of a window a couple times for, I just didn't want that comparison.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but I never talked about it. I didn't think anybody cared. In fact, nobody did care, except they knew that I had principles. They knew that I wasn't going to bend, and they attributed that to my military experience. They had no idea. Nobody even knew I had Silver Stars. In fact, I just put these up because my wife asked me to do it within the last year. It was in my closets all these years. Nobody knows.
But you have done some speaking at schools or things like that?
Yeah. I go to Hope. In fact, I've talked at Grand Valley in the past about it, and it's probably in 20 years. I've talked at Michigan State, at Western, Central, Hope. I do Hope every semester. In fact, as Hope's got some of their alumni have asked me August 5th, I think I'm doing a 2-hour presentation for some Hope alumni about the Vietnam War, one of their history. They have a syllabus that they had. They asked me to submit. I don't know where that came from, but so I did, and then I got confirmation that they wanted me to do that. So somebody recommended me to do it.
All
Yeah,
right.
so I'm happy to talk about it. I don't shy away from it. I got so much to tell.
Yeah, you do. You've also been back to Vietnam.
Yeah.
How did that happen or come about the first time?
One of my old helicopter pilots that flew above me every day, his name was Jerry Anderson, and he moved up here to Michigan because about 5 years ago, we saw each other at a reunion, and he remembered me, and we renewed our old acquaintances, and I got him a job up here. He was looking for a job, so he moved up here, and he was going back to. He called me and he said, "Going back to Vietnam, wanted me to come with him." He flew a white helicopter, which is a scout helicopter, and his good buddy was a guy named Bobby Zahn who flew guns, a gunship, and he flew this big hog. Well, they wanted me to come back with them. Pilots don't like to be in the ground in Vietnam. They pucker up. Well, they knew that I owned the ground and that I'd do anything. So they wanted me to go, and I said, no, I have no reason. I don't want to go back there. There's nothing that would interest me. So he worked on my brain. See, he says, well, I'll call you back next week. So he called me back in a week, and he said, now look, by the time you want to go back, you're going to be too damn old to appreciate it. So let's go now. Why don't you just go now? Well, when he told me that I'm going to be too old to appreciate it, that really got me going. And so I did give it some serious thought. And I said, you know, you're right. What have I got to lose? Well, I'd just gotten back from taking my family to South Africa. And so I didn't know if I could afford another trip, but I put it on American Express. And I went with those two idiots. And we had a great time. And so I saw Vietnam like I'd never seen before. I never saw a road or a city. I never saw electricity. I never ate their food. I never saw their culture. I never saw them dressed up other than black pajamas. I never saw anything like that. It just rekindled this fire that I knew there was something special there that I had missed, and that I owe it to myself to look at it differently. And then so that's how I got back.
And you've gone back again after that.
Yeah, well, so I go to the I'm a Rotarian, so I go to the Rotary Club, and they asked me to do a presentation. So I talk about my trip. One of the Rotarians is a Vietnamese expatriate, and he's going to go back in a couple months. Well, I don't know if I'd go with him. He's going to do business. I said, well, I'll go. So he's going to do business. So I go back, and so I met some business people, and while he's doing his business in his own private way, I thought, well, maybe I can do something. And so I hired a car and a guide, and I went out in Pleiku, up there by the border, and I saw a furniture factory. We went in there, and they're making furniture and flooring, and I just put flooring in my home, and hardwood flooring, and it was expensive. And I saw what I could buy it for over there, and maybe I could start a business. And so I ordered a container right there on the spot. And so I had to get my banking situated, and so I got international bankers going. I had Lloyd's of London, my insurers. I got a supply chain set up, and I started importing hardwood floors. And I made the acquaintance of the commies that were working for the government and owned the place. And we talked about his war injuries and my injuries. He showed a few scars. We had a couple beers together.
Yeah. What sort of attitude do the Vietnamese have toward Americans who go back?
Well, they love us. They really they admire us. They don't dislike us in any way, shape, or form. They're very curious. They respect us for what happened. They're very open and appreciative when we come and see them. They want to talk to us about stuff. They want to practice their English on us. They want to introduce us to their food and their culture, and I think they want to do business. I mean, they got a business sense, and they want to prove, I guess, to the Americans that they're really humans. and because I dehumanized them, and that was wrong. It was wrong on my part. But what are you going to do? Right? What the hell?
Now, you also got to meet some people who were sort of fairly high-ranking Army officers or things like that too at some point, right?
Vietnamese?
Yeah.
Yeah. On one of my trips back there, I was actually in Hanoi, and I was working. I had a guide, a young lady, and she took me to this flooring company, and somehow she hooked up with them. I don't know how the heck she did that, but this young man, we go down some alleys, and everybody lives in their home and business at the same time anyway, so it's home office combinations. A young, he was probably 40 years old. He comes out and we talk about stuff, about wood floors, and actually he had Pergo, for God's sake, Pergo, back in Kentucky or something.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know about me and about if I was ever in the Army. And yeah, were you ever in Vietnam Army, American Army in Vietnam? Yeah. Were you ever stationed in Pleiku? Yes, I was actually. His father worked in Pleiku in 66, 67. He said, was I there then? Yes, I was. He said, well, his father was a general for General Giap in the Pleiku, and in fact, the Pleiku area was his area that he controlled as a North Vietnamese Army guy, commander, and he ended up being General Giap's chief of staff. So he asked me if I wanted to meet him. I said, well, yeah, I'd love to meet your father. He asked me, would you want to capture him? I said, oh no. But would he want to capture me? And he said, no, my father was nice, don't want to capture you. He asked me if I wanted to buy arms. I said, no, I'm not into arms. I don't buy arms. I said, I want to make that clear. He said, all right. He said, 10 minutes, my father will be here. I said, okay, I'll wait right here. So about 10 minutes, the curtain opens up, and here comes his father, who seemed to be in 80. He had a tremor like Parkinson's in his left hand, and he came in his pajamas, silk, like everybody wore in those days, and a nice silk robe and slippers. The nicest man, and he must have went to Kuth school or general school, like our American generals go to Kuth school or something, because I never met a general who wasn't a gentleman and an officer and very nice. And that Vietnamese guy was very nice, and he hadn't talked to an American since the 60s. And so his son translated stuff to me. And we had a very nice, short conversation, maybe 5 minutes. And then he was tired. He said, well, he has to go to rest. And so he excused himself and went back through the curtains. I was totally blown away. I was totally impressed. And then when I got back to the States, his son emailed me and wanted to know if I wanted to sell weapons.
Oh.
So he somehow thought I was a weapons dealer.
Okay. Well, some things change more than others then.
Well, I did email him back and said I wouldn't sell weapons to that commie son of a bitch anyway. I would watch Patton or something, and I got all geeked up about it, and so I passed on a Patton euphemism and called him a commie son of a bitch. I haven't heard back.
I might not have quite gotten that particular reference, but yeah.
Well, that took care of that.
All right. When you look back at the whole business now, how do you think that the time in Vietnam wound up affecting you? How were you different when you got back than when you went over?
I appreciated my family more. I appreciated a hot shower. I appreciated good hot food. I'm more in tune with my God. I'm more in tune with myself. I understood myself better, and I realized that I was born a warrior. I realized that I can control a lot of my own destiny, but not all of it, but a lot of it. And I understand that you can control a lot of things. And if you want to have a good day, you can have a good day. If you want to have a bad day, you can have one of those too, but it ain't worth it. So I think it really defined me as a person. You know, I look on the when I see a mountain, I look on the sunny side of the mountain, not the cloudy side of the mountain. So I don't know.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story. You've killed off the second hour of tape, so I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.